My name is Ahmed, and from my earliest memories I was raised within a deeply religious Muslim family. Islam wasn't merely part of our daily routine, it shaped our entire way of life. I prayed 5 times a day, learning verses of the Quran with care and seeking comfort and knowledge in the mosque. My faith brought me pride and conviction. I believed that by following Allah's commands and Islamic principles, I would one day stand confidently before God. Because my worldview was built on the teachings of the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, I studied the hadiths, committed important Quranic passages to memory, and always turned to Islamic scholars for answers about life. I felt guided by a clear sense of purpose, trusting that I was on the straight path. Still, there were nights I lay awake, worried about whether my good deeds truly outweighed my sins. The Quran warned of judgment and the weighing of deeds, and sometimes I wondered if my efforts would ever be enough. Before we continue, make sure to comment where you're watching from and subscribe for more amazing stories. Although I was interested in learning about other faiths, particularly Christianity, I considered the Christian view of Jesus being God's Son impossible to accept. I saw Jesus as a revered prophet, nothing more. Beliefs like the Trinity made no sense to me, and I couldn't wrap my head around salvation by grace alone. It felt too convenient, as if it excused people from the responsibility of earning God's favor through righteous actions. For years I debated Christians on these points, often quoting the Quran and finding what I saw as contradictions in the Bible. Underneath my outward confidence, however, those midnight doubts still lingered, faint but persistent. Everything changed on a trip to see relatives in another city. I started the day as usual, prayed Fajr at dawn, said my devotional prayers, and discussed religious matters with my younger brother. Later that afternoon, I felt a slight pain in my chest, which I brushed off as minor discomfort. But by evening, the pain became so sharp I could hardly breathe. My brother insisted we go to the hospital, and I tried to protest, assuming it was just indigestion, but soon I could barely stay upright. Within an hour, I found myself on a hospital bed, hooked up to machines as doctors determined I was having a severe heart attack. None of it seemed real. I was young, careful with my health, and spiritually devout. How could this happen? Fear wrapped itself around me, and all I could think about was my family, my unfinished prayers, and whether I was about to meet God before I felt ready. As my vision blurred, I kept whispering the Shahada, hoping my faith would save me. Then everything went black. At first, there was only emptiness, no sound, no light, no physical sensation. But there was also a powerful sense that this was not the end. Suddenly, I became aware that I was looking down at my own body in the hospital room. The medical staff was scrambling around me, and my brother stood frozen, terrified. Oddly, I wasn't panicked. I felt strangely calm, as if I were an observer, no longer in pain or tied to my physical body. That's when I saw the light. It wasn't coming from the hospital, but from somewhere beyond. It pulsed and shimmered with a force that pulled at me, deep and compelling. Even though I was tempted to hold on to what I knew, my own reality, this light was so powerful that I could not resist. Everything else faded away, and I found myself moving through a tunnel of pure brightness. I felt a warmth that went far beyond any physical heat, seeming to reach the center of my being. Eventually, the light enveloped me, and I felt the deepest peace I had ever experienced. Yet at the same time, I sensed something immense was about to happen. Then I saw him, a figure moving closer through the radiance, carrying an overwhelming presence of love and compassion. I somehow knew this was Jesus. That realization rattled everything I believed. To me, Jesus had always been a prophet, nothing more. Yet here he was, exuding an authority and love I had never known. My mind raced. This can't be real. You're just a prophet. How can this be? But Jesus spoke gently, telling me he had answers I needed. Instantly, I was shown scenes of his miracles, healing the sick, restoring sight to the blind, raising the dead, things the Quran references. Then I saw biblical accounts I'd previously dismissed, like the crucifixion. I saw his sacrifice and felt the magnitude of his love for humanity. He explained grace, that no one can earn salvation through deeds alone, because no one can live without sin. Instead, his sacrifice made salvation a gift that anyone could choose to accept. After that, I witnessed both heaven, a realm bursting with indescribable beauty and joy, and hell, a place of despair and separation from God. Jesus showed me these realities to help me understand that, rather than a system of earned merits, the key was a relationship with God through him. In that moment, I realized he was more than just a prophet. He was the very path to God that I had so firmly denied. Jesus asked me to accept this gift of grace and trust him. Though it upended everything I had believed, I felt the truth of it in my soul. With tears, I said yes. He told me my time in that realm was not over. I needed to return to share what I had witnessed. Then, just as suddenly, I was pulled away from that blinding, enveloping light. I awoke in my hospital bed, doctors exclaiming in surprise that I had come back. My family, especially my brother, was overjoyed, but I felt shaken. I had experienced a revelation that contradicted so much of my upbringing. Over the next few days of recovery, I wrestled internally. What had I seen? How could Jesus be more than a prophet? The thought of telling my family and friends frightened me. They were devout Muslims, and I feared rejection or worse. Yet Jesus' words, "Go Ahmed, share the truth. I am with you," echoed in my mind. I began studying the Bible for myself. I discovered passages that fit with what the Quran said about Jesus, only fuller and more profound. I saw prophecies that pointed to him and realized I'd misunderstood many teachings of my own tradition. My first attempts to share my story were cautious. I told a close friend, then gradually opened up to others. Some people dismissed me, believing I had merely hallucinated or been led astray. Others listened, but with deep skepticism, questioning how I could leave my old convictions behind. A few, however, were intrigued enough to ask questions, to consider that perhaps my story held truth for them as well. The hardest part was telling my parents. My father was hurt, angry, and confused, while my mother wept in disbelief. My siblings also had different reactions. Some outright denied my experience. Others wanted to hear more but were hesitant to deviate from our family's faith. I felt the sting of their doubts, but also a comforting presence, reminding me I was not alone. As the months went on, I grew bolder in speaking about Jesus' grace and how he wanted a relationship with each of us. A local Christian community embraced me and provided support when I felt overwhelmed. Their acceptance showed me I had not merely left one religious identity for another. I was discovering a God who loves people personally and sacrificially. Gradually, I saw changes in the lives of those around me. Some who were indifferent to faith started asking genuine questions. Others opened themselves to the idea that Jesus was more than they had realized. My younger brother even approached me privately, saying he was unsure about everything but wanted to learn more. That moment gave me hope. Maybe I hadn't lost my family after all. In time, I began speaking more publicly about my journey, emphasizing that Jesus' message doesn't simply cancel out what I learned in Islam, but rather fulfills and transcends it. It's about grace, a forgiveness we can't earn, but can only accept, and it transformed my heart in a way that rules and rituals never had. With every new conversation, I tried to share the compassion and understanding I'd felt when I stood in that divine light. Looking back, I see that the questions and uncertainties I had as a Muslim were preparing me for this encounter. Even my debates with Christians shaped my curiosity. Now, though the road has been fraught with emotional upheaval and relational challenges, it has been worth every struggle. Each story I tell and each person I speak with is a testimony to how powerful the love of God can be. If my journey sparks curiosity or yearning in your own heart, I encourage you, seek Jesus for yourself. Ask questions, open the Bible. He meets us wherever we are, regardless of our background or how uncertain we feel. My story is just one example of His willingness to show us truth and grace, even if it disrupts everything we once believed. Thank you for letting me share my experience. If you have questions or want prayer, please leave your name in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories like mine, there are other testimonies that reveal God's unending love and the transforming power of grace.